Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a really cool video. We got to sit down with Darren Treasure, who is a mental sport performance coach that I've worked with through the Oregon Project, my time at the Oregon Project, now continue to work with. He works with many athletes across the sport. Galen Rupp, he worked with Mo Farah, he worked with most people who went through the Oregon Project, works with athletes outside of track and field, in professional football, MLS, he's worked with golf, he works with NBA players currently. So we had a really good perspective on just mental performance and how it just is a huge part of what you have to do to be great in this sport and in life and things you can do. So it was a really, really cool interview, super informative. So sorry about the audio to start with. The audio was somewhat kind of messy on his end. He had some issues with his headphones and stuff. So it kind of cuts in and out a little bit, but never really goes away. It just kind of quiets down a little bit. But if you do enjoy this video and this kind of content, comment down below with things you'd like to see. I have some really cool ideas in the making and some more videos like this and bringing on more people, not just athletes, onto the stream. So if you have more ideas, drop them in the comments below. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button so you guys know when the next video drops. Make sure you like this video so that I know you guys like the content. And then every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday on Twitch, I go live around 7:30 on the East Coast. And we go live, we chat, we hang out for a little bit, play some Warzone, play some games, play some Fortnite. I'm starting up a Minecraft server probably pretty soon. So there's a lot of fun things going on over there. You can ask me any questions over there. But yeah, drop comments down below if you guys want to see more comments or content like this. But otherwise, enjoy the video. And I'm really enjoying everything going on with this community. Discord links down below. Join that, ask questions, make suggestions there. But hey, stay tuned for the next video. But for now, enjoy this and hopefully help you with your mental performance. Darren Treasure. Okay, now we should have audio. You go ahead and start with your story. Start with a little bit about it, and I appreciate you coming on. So,
thanks, Clayton. Appreciate it. So my background is I'm from the UK. As an athlete, when I was younger, I played rugby and cricket. When my rugby career ended, I had a phenomenal opportunity to come to the States to go to graduate school, where I attended the University of Illinois, where I got my master's and my PhD. From there, I was a college professor for 10 years at Illinois, at Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville. And then the last 6 years of my academic career, I was a professor at Arizona State, where I had a joint appointment in the psychology department and the kinesiology department. During that 10 years, my research really focused on elite level performance from a psychological perspective and also motivation. It gave me the opportunity to work with some really pretty interesting people during that block of time. And I was also consulting, working with athletes across a full gamut of sports, ranging from track and field to wrestling to football to basketball, baseball. 2004, I took a sabbatical and I never went back to academics, and I just started consulting full time with individual athletes, teams, franchises, national governing bodies. And then 2007, started working with Nike with their track and field athletes, primarily athletes coached by Alberto Salazar. And so that's how I met Clayton. So I now currently still work with track athletes that are sponsored by Nike. Plus, I also have individual athletes I work with who in the NBA. So I have a couple of guys who are currently in the bubble, as it were, down in Orlando. And then I have 3 NFL players who don't really know what they're doing or what they're about to do, because there's complete lack of clarity on their return to play protocols that are being put in place. And then I have one soccer player who's in the National Women's Soccer League. So she's playing in Utah at the moment in their bubble. So that's sort of a background briefly on me.
Nice. Yeah. So like I said, I've been working with you since 2017. So just about 4 years, I guess, roughly 3 or 4 years. And I mean, I will lead it with the leaps and bounds I've grown mentally by working with you has just been incredible. Um, that's where I'll start with that. But I guess my first question for you, and you kind of touched on it a little bit with working with multiple sports. Um, I'm always curious by that, and we always kind of talk about it a little bit when we have our meetings and talk a little bit. What are the differences with this predominantly being a track and field audience here? What's the differences for you working with multiple sports? I know you worked with golf at one point, and I've asked you golf questions for my game, all the way to working with the guys in the bubble to the NFL guys, soccer guys. What's the difference between the sports, and maybe what do you do? What sport do you enjoy most?
Well, I think I'm going to turn that question just a little bit and start off with the similarities. So I think that elite level athletes, developmental athletes, recreational athletes are far more similar than they're different based on sport. There's my rule of thumb is that there's sort of 80% of what I do is very, very consistent across sports. Then there's an additional, then there's 10%, which is very much sport specific. And within sport specific, I would go as far as saying event specific. So for example, for the last Oregon, I've worked with athletes from multiple events. So I think shot putters, throwers are different than jumpers, than sprinters, than middle distance runners from distance runners. So there's an event specificity that goes into understanding the interplay between mental performance and physical performance. And then the last 10% is really a personality component that everybody comes to their sport with their unique personality traits. And I think that for me, what I find the most interesting part of my job is melding those three things together. So the sort of like structure of we know works in pressure situations, we know how we to challenge. So how do we actually create the processes and the systems and the skill set to enable people to be very effective in those situations? But then also understanding the interplay between the personality and the sport. So I've got, I would say that distance runners, not necessarily middle distance runners, but distance runners in general tend to be a little bit more introverted, a little bit. I mean, I've worked with a number who would be generously described as antisocial. So they're very different than, say, for example, some of my NBA guys who are exactly at the other end of an introversion extroversion continuum. They're extremely extroverted, and so, for example, being in the bubble at the moment is extremely demanding and challenging for them because it is something they are just not predisposed to. So gets at what you were looking for, Clay. But I mean, there's that interplay between the personality type, the individual sport that the athlete is competing in, and then this 80% block, which is really mental performance and what we know about the way that the mind works and how mindset works and how we should be approaching practices, the way that we should be reviewing after practice, competition, those type of things.
Gotcha. Is there a difference between working with the individual athletes versus the team athletes other than just obviously the component of your as an individual track athlete, the focus is on you. Is there similarities between working with team athletes versus the individual athletes?
Yes, there is, and I would put that into that category of the task characteristics, what they're actually being asked to do. So with my team sport athletes, we spend most of our time working on their individual mental performance, but then that has to be placed within the dynamics of a team environment. So I would be remiss to not talk also about interpersonal relationships, how the locker room operates, the nature of the relationships between the coaching staff and the individual athlete. So there is definitely more complexity to a team sport athlete, just simply because there are more variables and there are more things going on. Whereas obviously, for example, you have a much more limited number of people that you're interacting with on a daily basis that are responsible for, your development and performance. So, you have so within track and field, the most important relationship clearly is the relationship between the athlete and the coach. That can also be the case in a team sport environment, but the actual group itself, the team itself, is a hugely important variable as well that can affect positive and negatively an athlete's performance.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I was as soon as I read that out, I said that question out loud of like individual versus team. It almost like triggered like as much as like it tracks an individual sport, especially at the professional level. Even if you are part of a team, um, it still is an individual sport. It doesn't matter what your teammates do. It doesn't help you at all. But what I do every day is work to build a team around me and work with a team, whether that's physical therapist, massage coach, wife, training partners, I mean, you name it, the small team I have. And there is a relationship aspect to that translates. It's just not necessarily you're not relying on that person to perform at a sports performance level. You're just looking at them to perform in a way to increase your own performance, I guess. So I 100% like seeing those similarities. But we keep using the word mental performance, I guess. And like what is mental performance? Like how do you relate it to the brain, to the body? Like it kind of explain a little bit about this term mental performance versus just like mental training, I guess.
Well, I think it's an interesting field. In many ways, the way I look at mental performance is very much is like the software that goes inside the brain. If the brain is the hardware, then the mental performance piece is the software. So it deals with values, attitudes, beliefs, the way you approach um, competition, challenge, adversity. So it's really around your thinking, your cognitions, your beliefs, your values, and I think that that's the piece that is training. So then you use your mental skills training to affect a change in that structure of beliefs, values. I think that that's really what we do as a profession, as a mental in the mental performance area. I think if one uses physical training as an example. I mean, you stress your body and then you recover looking for an adaptation. It's very similar in mental performance. I mean, you train your mind to deal with challenge and adversity, increasing amounts of that, so that you can actually get better when you have to be at your best in competition. Um, and what we've identified is just like the key characteristics or the key beliefs, the key ways of approaching situations to positively influence performance.
Gotcha. So I guess this is kind of I just got a question. I guess this kind of goes off a little bit. Someone asked in chat here. So when it comes to like the mental barriers related to track and field, I guess, or any sport, we'll say like sub 4 mile or breaking a certain time or winning a race. When you have these barriers that you're trying to break through, how do you prepare the athlete, or how would you prepare as an athlete to be prepared to face the stress prior to and during that moment of trying to break through?
Great question. I mean, one of the interesting things about that is if we take the 4 minute mile, for example, as one of those barriers, was that a real barrier or was that a perceived barrier? Was that something that truly existed, or was it something that had become so huge, difficult to overcome that a number of individuals were banging their heads against it and they just couldn't do it? Um, because obviously after Roger Bannister broke the 4 minute miles, there was just this flood of athletes who, very quickly afterwards did the same,
Yeah.
which would lead one to believe that it was more psychological than it was physical. I mean, I think we've seen the same thing with any number, arbitrary number that we say, well, that's something really, really difficult to break. And oftentimes when you look at that, the paradox for me in all of these sports is, how do you actually achieve something, breakthrough, for example, without thinking about actually breaking through? So If I was to say, making a putt to win the Masters, you desperately want to make that putt. You desperately want to, actually execute that skill. The worst thing about trying to make the putt, you need to actually think about the process, what it actually takes to be a great putter, to go through your pre-shot routine, for example. So in a track environment, let's use an example of. Here's a great example. So when Galen Rupp broke the American record in Brussels in 2011 in the 10,000 meters, he ran, I think it was like 26:46. Well, up until that point, he'd been banging his head trying to go sub 27. Then all of a sudden, he dropped 16 seconds off of what he was trying to achieve. And I think one of the things that took place that evening was it was one of those moments when he realized that just simply focusing on his process and being as calm as he possibly could throughout the course of the race elevated his chances of actually achieving what he wanted to achieve. And then he had the right race with the right competition in the right evening with the right weather, and everything fell into place. And all of a sudden, he crushed, the American record. Um, when he broke the American record again, when he ran 26:42 at the Prefontaine a few years ago, it was exactly the same. He just got into a rhythm. Everything was calm. Everything just came to him based on his level of physical fitness, as opposed to him stressing or worrying about it. And if I contrast that to when Galen was trying to break 13, particularly in the summer of 2010, he ran, I think, 3, 4, maybe 5 races in Diamond League races in Europe where he was running anywhere between 13:04 to 13:10. Well, in each one of those races, he was so concerned to the point of it being so anxious about breaking 13 that he never really allowed himself the best opportunity to go under 13. When he did run under 13 in 2012 at the Prefontaine, he was coming off altitude. He and Mo were exhausted. They were tired. They both ran 12:50, whatever it was. And neither one of them could believe they did it because they went into the race and really their mindset was just try to be as relaxed as they possibly could for as long as they possibly could. And in many ways, the really elite performers are the ones who are able to trust that when they get into those moments, desperately want to make a breakthrough. So if you can actually, in those moments, instead of pushing harder, in many ways, at least psychologically, relax more, it gives you a much better opportunity to achieve that breakthrough.
No, because I'm thinking about, as you're talking through that, I'm thinking about how I would apply it or answer that question. And I would say that, like, kind of to piggyback off of some of the things you said, like, for me, it's about like creating a process to achieve the barrier or achieve the goal I'm trying to set out, and then trusting that process 110%. And then, like you said, almost being relaxed through the process, like following the process, understanding there's going to be ups, downs, changes to it. It's not going to go exactly as planned. The race isn't going to go exactly as planned. The warm up isn't going to go. The week before isn't going to do exactly how you want it to be. But understanding that if I follow this process to a certain extent, and when it comes to the day of the actual performance, I do what I like mentally want to achieve, and step on the track and mentally or physically perform the way I can, that everything kind of should fall into place type deal. It's, instead of trying to force it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a quote that I use with all my athletes, which is one of my favorite quotes. It's from a Greek philosopher, emperor, Marcus Aurelius, and the whole idea is, the closer I am to calm, the closer I am to strength.
No, 100%. Like, I mean, I still to this day in almost every workout, half 3/4 of the workout I spend just telling myself, like, relax, like, run the time you're supposed to run, do what you need to do physically, but mentally just stay relaxed, and then physically in turn you'll be even more relaxed.
Well,
Is that
what I was going to say, Clayton, I mean, one of the things we've obviously had the opportunity to go to Coronado and spend time with Navy Special Warfare. And that's one of the big takeaways
oh yeah,
from being in and around SEALs is that these guys who are, rawest, with the biggest positive and negative consequences if they make mistakes. They spend their entire existence in training trying to become as mindful and as relaxed in their minds as they possibly can. And so, part of the reason that we go down there is to learn from the best and to learn from people who are in environments that are, the biggest risk reward consequence they could ever imagine. And realizing if it works for them, then it really should work for me, whether me, you, or Galen, or a high school cross country runner, or a high school. I mean, it's understanding that that's the way we give ourselves the best opportunity to excel.
I mean, if a guy can go through buds training and has the mental mindset to get through buds training and through Navy SEALs training and through Hell Week and then go into combat and do some of the things that they do, I feel like there's a lot that you can learn from them to run an 800-meter race.
I think you put your finger on it when you use the word trust. It's like, we can have this conversation and we can go, at a logical, rational sort of level, go, yep, that all makes perfect sense. But then the difference between the people who actually do it and those who can't is what happens in practice, what happens in competition. And I truly believe that the biggest differentiator in a group of very similarly physically talented, well conditioned, well trained athletes is which out of that group are capable of doing this when it really matters. And those who just can't, that there's something that just gets in the way of them being able to relax and being able to trust, themselves and their process and their preparation and all the work they've put in so that they actually achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes 110% sense. I have one more broad question, and then I have a couple of specific questions, unless Chad has any more general broad questions or anything. Um, what can athletes do at any sport at any level, that they could take away from this, and exercises or things beyond just the broad concepts like trusting in a process, relaxing, all these great broad general things. Is there anything they can specifically take away from this and maybe do on a regular basis, or keep track of, or exercises they can do to help their performance on and off the track?
Well, I think the starting point, to start globally again and then nail down, is that you have to understand and value the role of mental performance in development and performance. I mean, that's the starting point, because we as human beings, we do what we value. So if it's all well and good to say, oh yeah, mental performance is really important. But then my follow-up question is, well, how much time do you practice in training? And if the answer is I don't, then you don't really value it. So then you have to be motivated and have a desire to get better at it. After that, it's like, okay, recognizing that this is a trainable aspect of performance. And now let's look at some low hanging fruit. So the stuff that I oftentimes talk to athletes about to get them thinking about this is create a mental model. Who are you? And oftentimes that's sort of like this whole idea of, on my best day, what am I like? And identify the thoughts, your feelings, the way you behave, and sort of really sort of think about that. And then recognize that that maybe is my standard. And I need to try to aspire to be like that person every single day. Uh, so I think it's oftentimes about being accountable and responsible. So I talk a lot with athletes about being aware, because self-awareness is such a critical piece of becoming the best you can be. What naturally evolves out of that exercise is recognizing what what can I actually do something about? Because I think what we find is, particularly young athletes, they spend an incredible amount of mental energy concerning themselves with things that they have absolutely no. And I think that as soon as you begin to just accept responsibility and are accountable to what you can control, it's very liberating. It's very freeing. It enables you to sort of just put all of your energy into a constructive, positive direction. So I think those are two things that initially, whenever I work with athletes, that's where we start. We say, okay, on my best day. So if I think about my best 3 races, what was I thinking about before? What was I before the start? What did I think about during? And what did I think about afterwards? And so think about those 3 great performances, and then think about the 3 worst performances. And one of the things you'll probably realize when you do that exercise is that patterns. When I perform well, I tend to do A, B, C. And when I poorly, I don't do those, and maybe I do things that are completely different. Because then it's like, okay, so that's what I'm going to be. That's my standard. I'm going to be consistent at executing these things, which I know, based on the 3 best performances I've had, are indicative and predictive of me doing well. And then the other thing is like then taking the next step and saying, okay, well, what can I control and what can I not control? It's funny. I had a conversation earlier this afternoon with one of my NBA guys, and he started by saying, I know we've talked about this millions of times, but one of the things I'm struggling with at the moment is thinking about things I have no control over. And it never stops. That is a big challenge, but you have to be aware of it. And then you have to be able to nudge yourself back to being present and focused on what you can actually do something about. There's a great quote from the former New Zealand rugby coach. He used to preach to his teams who are the most successful team in the history of team sport. The whole idea of your head.
You're like cutting out a little bit.
So is that better?
Yeah, there you go.
And the quote is, your head needs to be where your feet are. Because if your head's ahead of your feet, you're not going to be able to do anything. And if your head's behind your feet, meaning in the past, you're not going to be able to do any good anyway. So it's all about making sure your head is where your feet are. So those were 2 things that I would think are very valuable exercises. One is just think a little bit about who you are. When you perform well, when you don't perform so well, look for those patterns, then be self-aware of those instances and being able to nudge yourself back to the present and a focus on what you can control.
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%. A very specific question, and I strongly am curious by the answer to this. I'm sure we talked about it, but the summary of the question is pretty much, for example, is you can run a 5K very well at X pace. You can run it at 70 seconds to 400. You can run really strong. You feel really good. You do everything right. And then in training, though, trying to run a mile at that pace or a half of that race feels difficult, or whatever race you want to do. Trying to run that race pace in practice and like duplicate that race feeling in practice where your performance wise is extremely difficult. What's the key to performing well in practice the same way that somebody can mentally and physically perform well in a race?
Well, I think one of the things I always look at with sports, again, going back to one of your first questions, Clayton, about the differences between sports, is that I often look at sports in terms of what are training sports and what are competing sports. And, for example, basketball, baseball, they're competing, play a lot of games. So you've got to be able to deal with the ups and downs of multiple games in a short period of time, and you've got to have routines and processes in place to deal with that. And then one of the things that takes place in track and field is a training sport where there aren't as many races. So I always, like we've worked on, is that the two or 3 times a week, which are the main workouts, I want my athletes approaching those workouts as if they were races. So the night before, sitting down and identifying typically 3 very, very specific process goals, very specific performance indicators for the next day, making sure that they are relaxed and they are ready for the workout so that they get the most out of that workout. And then after the workout, doing a corrective review, which is just sort of like a feedback exercise where they're thinking, okay, what did I do good? What could I have done better? And what am I going to do next? Because if you think about it, if you three really hard workouts, 2 or 3 workouts during that training block, if you think about baseball, they played 5 games in the process of that same week. And they're going through that process every single game,
Yeah.
every at bat, every innings they pitch. So I think it's sometimes with track athletes, it's getting them to truly understand and buy into the fact that that workout is like a race day, and so approach it that way. Make sure that you are exactly where you need to be from a mindset perspective, so that you get the most out of that workout.
No, I've started doing that, and I guess one thing that I will give as a personal tip that kind of, I guess, blend into 2 points, and then is to keep track of those kind of like mental goals, to keep track of my mental uh, process per each workout. Is I throw it in my log as well. As I almost have like a mini mental log that if I have a big workout where I went through this entire mental process for, I keep track of that process so that I can revisit that just as much as the physical performance I had in the workout. I could go back and say I had a really good physical workout. What did I do mentally that got me to that level during the workout? And I think that's something that like you can very simply do to help your growth along versus just trying to be like, oh, what was I thinking the night before that 5 by mile workout I did a month ago? Now you can go back and be like, oh, I was thinking about this process and these 3 keys I was thinking about going into the workout. Let's try to replicate that going into this tough workout.
Oh, I think that's exactly right. I think sometimes, I think track athletes, out of all the athletes I work with, do the best job at journaling. Trying to get some of my NBA or NFL guys to journal is more of a challenge. But I think, having the ability to go back and sort of think about, well, when I did this workout before, this is what I was thinking, this is how I approached it, these were my goals, and this is how I did. And sort of making sure there's a connection there between those progressions is incredibly powerful, because it all links into your confidence and whether or not you feel confident you can actually go out the next day harder, longer, more intense than you did before.
Exactly. Somebody just asked about nerves before a race. Anything, talk about a little thing about anything you do at. Can you talk about a little bit about anything you do at Olympics or World Champs to stay mentally composed or pre-race nerves? I guess like for me, I'll talk and then I'll let Darren kind of touch on it from the performance coaching side of. For me, it's about like we've talked about. It's creating that process and duplicating the process, no matter if it's 5 by mile on a high school track or whether it's an 800 meters at the Olympic Games. My process leading up of the day before, the night before, going through the race, creating the keys, before the race, going back through those keys and having a very simple process. So I'm not over complicating anything. I'm not worrying about anything that I can't control. I'm not worrying about the weather. I'm not worrying about all these different things. I'm just dealing with what I'm faced. I go through the same mental process all the way through, physically go through the same process, same warm up, same stretches. Try not to overthink anything. If I've got a little like tightness somewhere, then I just try to keep it like the same. Like I just kind of don't try to overdo anything. And I think that's something for me that I've started in college and then perfected through my professional career, is just trying to keep the process the same for both a hard workout and the Olympic Games or World Champs or a Diamond League or an invitational type meet. It's just because otherwise you're just gonna, I think, overthink it. And the only time I ever really get nervous is the like 10 seconds before the gun goes off. I'm nervous all the way through. I mean, no doubt about it. But where I actually feel like I get the shaking, like race beat, like heart, like beating fast nerves is really just right before the gun. But then once the gun goes off, everything's blank.
No, I think that's really good. I mean, the only thing I would add is that, and this is something that I try to teach, and I think it's an important concept, is that what you're feeling, whether it's workout or whether it's before a race, whether that's a regular season race, a district race, a state race, um, whatever you're feeling is real. those feelings are real. And I think there's a degree of acknowledging them, sort of accepting them. Wow, this is districts. This is, I really want to do well here. I want to make it to state. Um, and it's sort of like accepting that and then taking the next step, which is go to exactly where you were talking about, Clay, which is, I now need to go back to what I can control and focused on my process. I think one of the things, a classic mistake people make is they fight those thoughts, those feelings, instead of just simply acknowledging them. Because if you fight them, they're just going to build up and then they're going to come back and they're going to bite you when you really least want it to. So it's like, there's like, yeah, this really matters. I want to do well today. This is important to me. Okay, I'm accepting that. Now I'm going to nudge myself back to now. I'm going to focus on these three things because these are the three things that are most important to my process and allow me to actually perform. I want to perform at.
Yeah, no, I think if you're not at some point during the day of a big event, at least at some point have some type of situation where you get super nervous and you have to bring yourself back to, I guess, reality. You have to bring yourself back to the things you can control. You're almost like not ready for it. I think it's for me, if like I'm not, if it's not an event or a race or workout where at some point I'm not like, oh dang, like this workout's about to be really difficult, or I'm excited about it, or this race is about to be something special, and I get super nervous about it, it's almost like I'm not ready for it yet. I need to do something different to get myself ready for it. So um I guess my next question, and this is from personal right now for me, and the stream knows where I'm at with everything, is this sport's filled with injuries. A lot, I guess every sport's filled with injuries, but this sport's extremely difficult. That if you're faced with an injury, you're out for a long time. Regaining fitness can be extremely difficult physically. Mentally, I think it can be sometimes just as challenging because sometimes it's extremely difficult to say, I'm mentally 100% committed to what I'm doing. And if physically you're having trouble achieving the things, then mentally you kind of give in. What are some things that somebody could do that's coming back from injury or a long break, or took an off season, that they mentally can do to help push their physical performance back to where they want to be?
The number one thing is recognizing the relationship between the mind and the body, and the fact that the worst thing you can do to impede the recovery process to be experiencing distress. So anxiety and distress, because that just causes the body to not be able to recover optimally. So I think being relaxed is very, very important. And when we talk about being relaxed, we're really talking about breathing. The breath is the most important thing that you should be working on. Any really is the panacea for so many things that are challenging. So deep breathing on the diaphragm, oxygenating the body, particularly the mind, is a really important strategy. The other thing when you're coming back from injury is managing your expectations. Because I think a lot of athletes get extraordinarily frustrated, particularly if it's their first major injury. Tends to be, unfortunately, that we learn through experience, and if we've had multiple injuries, we typically get better at dealing with them from a psychological perspective. So I think but when we're going through a first injury or there's some real particular challenges, is recognizing that if our expectations are greater than reality, we're going to get frustrated. And if we get frustrated, that's when it's going to impede the recovery. So I think that those are things that are really, really central to being able to come back from an injury, is recognizing where you are, recognizing that it is a process and sometimes can take a lot of time, and realizing that the worst thing you can do is to be stressed about it. So continuing to work on your.
Oh, you're cut out. You still there? Oh, you cut out there at the end. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the last thing was just recognizing how important it is to stay relaxed and to be mindful of the connection.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's just cutting in and out a little bit, but we're okay. I have one more question, and then if Chad has anything else, but I just have one more. A lot of people are faced with what's going on in the world of meets being pushed back, seasons being canceled. Obviously, California being completely pushed off as like the first big organization. I know conferences are starting to push off some Olympic sports. Um, as an athlete, at whatever level you're at whatever, I guess, level of like season you're at, freshman, senior, or whether you're even a semi-professional and you're running like road race circuits in the fall here, the summer, how do you mentally like? How would you advise somebody to mentally just stay focused and stay strong? Because I mean, showing up to something that's so repetitive of sport that's extremely difficult to train for already, and then you take away some performance boosting things that help you. I mean, when you perform well in a race, it makes you excited to go back and keep working out. You don't have that, and you can only get so much out of like, oh, I ran a great workout today. Like eventually, I feel like it could eventually become extremely difficult to do that. What's some advice you have for people that are kind of facing those things?
Well, I think the first thing is to listen to what you just said, because I think it is very, very difficult. And if you think that you're going to be able to train at your best and to keep pushing forward without any sort of competitions in the future or without any sort of exciting things to be involved in, that's very, very challenging. And I think the one thing I would say to every athlete at the moment is give yourself a break. I mean, it's extremely difficult. It's funny that when quarantine began and this pandemic really cut in, there were all these emails going around from mental health specialists saying, "Oh, this might be a great opportunity to write a book, or to do this, or to do that, and to explore all these various things that you've never had the time to do." And I can remember thinking at the time that I thought that that was a very interesting approach. But now, as we're drifting into whatever month this is, it's sort of recognizing that many people didn't write a book, they didn't learn how to play the violin or the piano, and they didn't improve their golf game, and they're beginning to think, God, what did I do? What a waste of time I am. So I think the basic essence there is that you need to give yourself a break. I think constantly trying to find out when's the next race, what's going to happen with the season, what's happening next, although absolutely natural, is probably the worst thing you can do. I think at the moment it's one of these things that, again, we're talking about controlling what you can control, not being really hard on yourself, not being too stringent on the way you're approaching your racing, your training, because eventually there will be meets and there will be races. I think, like with you, Clayton, I mean, you can talk a little bit about how you've dealt with it, because I think we've had these conversations about, with the Olympics being, put back a year, and you moving, and lots of things that are taking place. I mean, how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, I had a lot because I mean I had the injury right before it got really bad. So I spent a week or two really like fighting an injury to get back for what was still in a season that wasn't really in question yet. And then as the injury became apparent, it was more serious than what we thought. That's when the season started to kind of collapse and the sport started to collapse. And then as I started to kind of get back from the injury, the season completely collapsed. The Olympics got pushed. I started to get back from the injury, then had a re-injury of the same thing, sort of type deal, and I don't want to say I hit rock bottom. I don't like that term, but I had a point where I really struggled through it. But it became a situation where I show up now or wake up every day focused on the biggest goal, which is 2021 and the rest of my career. And I kind of wake up thinking, what can I do today that's going to benefit that? But at the same time, I'm not going to, I guess, stress or really like kill myself over an exact day or exact workout, because right now, the minute details of a workout isn't going to make the difference come June or July. It's going to be the body of work right now for me. So I think for me, the focus is on the body of work versus individual little goals. It's about weeks and months of putting together mental and physical performances, and as well as you said, enjoying life. Like I've worked on my golf game, I moved across the country. I've been able to enjoy a lot of time at home over the summer where I've never been home for this much time over the summer. So there's a lot of things that have come as a benefit. But I think the one thing I've learned is to be able to focus on the body of work versus individual type reps or workouts or days of the week.
To have during this time.
What was that again?
I think that's exactly the mindset to have during this time, is to recognize it won't be smooth, it won't be linear, and to look at the totality of the body of work, like you said, as opposed to any individual workout or any individual day, because that isn't going to make or break it.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right, we have one more chat question and I'll let you go. I guess this is a good question too, and I'll kind of expand on it a little bit from what they asked. How do you handle your, I guess, your image in the media? And we're talking about like as an athlete, their image in the media, the negativity sometimes they can receive. How do you handle interviews or talking about different things? Like what are some tips you can give for high school and college kids who are new to it, just to kind of handle the pressure that social media and media outlets and parents and families and friends and all these different things can kind of put on you as a public image?
Well, it's obviously something that is changing daily with the social media platform and the perceived need to have a presence. I mean, my athletes range the full gamut, from people who are developing a brand and developing a platform for themselves, and I would sort of put you in that category, Clayton. And then there are a couple of my other guys, and then I have other athletes who literally don't really want to interview. And I think the take home for me is do what you feel comfortable with, be authentic, but also recognize that you are going to be held accountable for what you do and how. Obviously, if you're a high school athlete, colleges are looking at your social media to see what type of person you are, who you associate with, comments you make, how you present yourselves. And that has become a full-time job for companies providing these services to universities. So I think if you feel that as a high school student athlete, you can post whatever you want with impunity, is that you may end up finding that's not the case. So I think there needs to be some thought into what you say, how you present yourself. But in many ways, I look at social media and say it is just another way of presenting yourself. And what person do you want to present? Who do you want to put out there? And I think that that's a really important question. But at the end of the day, the most important thing for me is be authentic, be you. Because if you're not you, you'll end up falling down when people meet you,
So
who you are.
how do you deal with the negativity that some people say you want to be who you are, or you have a moment where you do fall down or you have a bad race? How do you deal with negativity from even just people around you all the way through the media and social media?
Well, I think that's obviously the most significant downside of the growth of these platforms. The research that is looked at, mental health and social media, it speaks to why Instagram, Facebook, other platforms have removed likes because it was causing all sorts of self-esteem issues. I think it's something where you have to recognize that if you go down that road and decide to play in that domain, there is going to be criticism, unfair, unfounded, probably inaccurate. Unfortunately, it's just a nature of the sort of society we currently live in, whereas it's very easy to be, a keyboard warrior, as it were, particularly when it's anonymous and you can just shoot arrows at people. So I think it's like, if you decide to go down that road, recognize that that's going to happen. Don't be surprised when it does. So I think that there's an element here of, you need to be certain that what you are choosing to put out there, again, is authentic and is something that you feel strongly about, because you will more than likely be attacked for it by probably a small minority of people.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I agree 100%. So, well, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you answering the questions, talking a little bit about it. I've talked about like the mental side of the sport before on stream, but I think hearing it from somebody who has experience and who I've learned a lot from, I think speaks wonders. And hopefully, a couple people were able to take some things and learn some things and help with their performances. So I really appreciate you sharing insights and spending some time with us.
Thanks, Clayton.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Awesome chat. Thank you. I don't know what was going on with the audio. I apologize for that. I don't know. I really feel bad. Audio has been obviously all over the place tonight. The call wasn't as smooth as what I wanted, but I hopefully the information was like still getting through. Just like I messaged him, just thanking him. I gotta talk to him anyways about something actually off after stream. But yeah, I hope you guys learned something. I'm gonna stay on stream here and I'll probably play some games here. Because it's only been on for an hour, so it's Tuesday, so I usually stream. But I really appreciate you guys asking questions. I appreciate you guys hanging out with him. It was a lot of fun, and I actually learned a lot too. So, housekeeping notes. We'll throw this up on YouTube. I'll share it out. Thursday will be a track talk. I'm almost positive who the guest is. Unfortunately, not Michael Norman. Michael Norman is busy on Thursday, so I think he's competing again on Thursday. Hopefully, we'll get him on over the next week or two. Like I said, next week will be a track talk on Tuesday versus Thursday. It'll be a track talk Thursday, but it'll be on Tuesday. This week will be Thursday. And then I'm gone for a week. I'm going on a little mini vacation. So I need to, as much as I like being home, I like traveling, so we just need to get out of the house. But yeah, if you guys have anything else you want to chat about tonight before I get into the games, feel free. I mean, I'll chat. We can chat. We can hang out. But yeah. So I mean, it was like it was cool. Mental performance. Seriously. I'm gonna pull up my log. Not tonight. I need to kind of get some stuff cleaned up with it to be able to share it with you guys. But I'm gonna put my log template. I just use Google Sheets. But I have like my training log, and then below it I have a mental performance log, and I do exactly what he talks about. Before, during, after, and I do it for workouts as well. Just need to be more controlled. Yeah, I think being able to be controlled starts with calling or understanding the process of like what it takes to be good or what you want to achieve in the big race, and then just like following that. And like I said, there's a lot of little things in track and field that you could think make a big difference, whether different things like that. But whoa, sorry. Like if you just control what you can control and then focus on yourself, then everything from there is just gonna like fall into place. Yeah, that's tough. I mean, like I said, I've been extremely, I guess, I don't know if that's lucky, but like I've been extremely able to handle like been able to handle some things, but I think nerve wise you gotta kind of just like almost accept them and use them as like, hey, that means I'm ready to go. This is obviously a big race, and that means my body is like telling me like it's time to do something special. Like I think you can mentally trick your body into a lot of things. So Noah, hey, Noah, thanks for the follow. Appreciate it, Noah. Omar, thanks for the follow. Appreciate it. Those happened while we were chatting, so appreciate it. Let me send him another text message real fast. But yeah, I think I'm gonna run some Warzone chat here. But I'll answer. I'm curious how you mentally at. Okay, so I had 2015. I had Pan Am Games, NACAX, and then I had World Championships in 2015. I would say at World Championships in 2015, I kind of tricked myself into being like the kid. Didn't really matter. I didn't perform. Like whatever I performed, like happened. And then why is my haircut so like flat on this side? Sorry. Is I kind of tricked myself into thinking like I was a kid at this, and I got caught up at I got caught up on just like being in the bird's nest at one point. I just kind of slowed myself down and just realized like I got to do what I got to do type deal. Um, and then it became like once I just kind of realized it's a race, it's just a bigger race. I was okay. I know it sounds really simple, and it probably won't help, but like I really do believe in that process of if I treat every race and work out similarly, then I can at least perform to at least some kind of extent.